All right, everybody, good afternoon. I'm just a little bit late with this one. This one came down when I was out, but here we are now to talk a little bit about the Seahawks' latest move. They did have another move in the tube here, and they have signed some interior offensive line depth. Tremayne Anchrum. And if you haven't heard of Tremayne Anchrum before, I can't blame you because I hadn't heard of him before this either. I got to be honest here. This is not a player that I could have identified purely on name. So, let's talk about Tremayne Anchrum. Let's see if there's anything that can be said about him beyond just the fact that he exists. And let's see what this might mean. So, Tremayne Anchrum Jr. Was a almost Mr. Irrelevant in the 2020 draft. He's currently 25 years old. He's going to turn 26 in a couple of months here. And he spent his whole career so far on the Los Angeles Rams. So he's been a reserve on the LA Rams offensive line for the last 4 years. Now he finds his way to the Seattle Seahawks. So he's actually very familiar with winning. He's very familiar with winning because not only did he participate very limitedly on a Super Bowl winning team with the Rams, but he also was a participant on two national championship winning teams. So, excuse me. So this guy's done a lot of winning in his career. He was a Clemson. He played tackle at Clemson, but he moved inside in the NFL because he has relatively short arms, and they didn't feel like he'd be able to quite make it at tackle. But he bumped over to guard, and if you take a look at what he did in college, it's actually pretty good. He played quite a bit over the 3 year span. 17, 18, 19 for Clemson teams that were mostly really good. Played right tackle, played a little bit of left tackle, and was generally graded out quite well. Only allowed 3 sacks over 3 years. He didn't start every game, but he started a lot of games, and he was a good player. But if you go back to his Wikipedia page, you can see that some of the testing was not ideal. He barely jumps over a phone book. He did have some pretty decent like bench press numbers, but his 40-yard dash and 10-yard split in particular were bad. So he barely got drafted. He ended up going in the 7th round, number 250 overall, and he's played about 100 snaps in his career. So you take a look at Anchrum Jr., the thing that stands out is, well, he didn't play very much, but this is all we got to go on. The what he did in 2023 is by far the most of anything he's done in his career. 96 snaps basically is 95% of his experience. So this is what we have to go on in the NFL. So the first thing that jumps out is that he's playing right guard. So that's where I think this guy is ultimately being viewed as a right guard. You typically don't go from right guard to left guard. It's a harder position to play, and it requires a little bit of a different skill set. That being said, one thing I can say about Anchrum when I looked into him in terms of like scouting reports and what people said about him at the time, he is somebody who is a zone scheme fit. He is somebody who would hit pull blocks. He is somebody who would throw blocks at the second level. He is somebody who would actually be used in space. A move guard, not somebody who just muscles up in the middle. So even though his testing numbers were really bad, when you looked at him at his best, he was somebody who was best off being used as a mobile guard. So this is kind of like Nick Harris to me. It's a guy who is limited in his talent. He's not a great player, but he is a scheme fit for what Ryan Grubb is probably going to need from his offensive linemen. So Tremayne Anchrum Jr., I'm not going to tell you he's a good player because there's no reason to believe that. His very small sample size in 2023 was actually pretty bad, but he is a scheme fit. So it's like a diet version of Nick Harris, where we're trying to get players that fit what we're doing. And the fact that the player is very limited and clearly not all that great is obviously a consideration, but they're at least trying to give themselves a chance to run the kind of offense they want to run. So, do I like it? Do I dislike it? I don't really think there's too much to say here. This guy, to me, very clearly should be occupying the role of backup right guard on this team. So, if we go over to the spreadsheet that I was looking at in the previous video, I'm going to sub him in at backup right guard behind Abe Lucas. So what this means probably is that Bradford is your starter at right guard, and Anchrum is going to be backing him up. Now, odds are very good that Anchrum got a minimum deal. He's done nothing in this league to warrant much more than a minimum deal. So, number one, he's going to be very cheap, so it shouldn't really affect the cap because his salary is going to replace the salary of somebody like Raekwon O'Neal, who was never going to make this team anyway, and we knew that. So, it doesn't really affect the cap unless we signed him for way more than I'm expecting, which if we did, I'm going to have something to say about that. But I think very clearly he needs to slot in as the backup right guard here. If we try to do something like, oh, we're going to bump Bradford over to starting left guard, and then Ancrum's going to be our starting right guard, I'm going to have a problem with that. That's a problem right there. Bumping Bradford over to an unnatural position for him, and then having Anchrum start when he's shown no ability to be starting caliber, that better not be the answer, is all I'm saying. But if he is your backup, then obviously you're a little bit thin at the position, but that's part of being a team under a salary cap. When you have a lot of dead money, you're going to have to be a little bit thin at some positions, and I understand it. I'm not looking to pull in a Pro Bowl roster here. I'm just trying to fill out the roster with guys who make some degree of sense. And Anchrum Jr., I can identify as being someone who makes sense in the same way I can with Nick Harris. The difference being that Nick Harris has actually shown capability of being a good player in this league, but the idea kind of remains the same. So we'll see about the money on Anchrum Jr., but if it's anything more than like 1.5 million, I'd be shocked. So things are really starting to take form here on this roster, and we can clearly see where the need is going into the draft. And there's not much we can do to address this problem in free agency. So when I say the draft, I do mean that's the only way to deal with it now. Unless you've got a big trade in the tube here, which even then, like monetarily, how do you make something like that work? You probably don't. So yeah, we're in a little bit better shape now. Things make a little bit more sense. We just need to find some left guards here, two, honestly, starter and backup, and things will at least have taken form. I know people are not going to be thrilled with the fact that it looks like Oluwatimi and Bradford have been handed the starting job, but I would point out that in the case of Anchrum specifically, it is not at all a reach to suggest that he doesn't make the final 53-man roster. If he's on the minimum contract, he's got very little guaranteed, if anything, and you should be able to just let him go if you end up drafting somebody like a Zach Sinter, or you end up drafting somebody like a Christian Mahogany, or even a McCormick. So I don't think there's any commitment here. Maybe like $100,000 or something. But yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it shaking out right now. So Tremayne Anchrum Jr. is your latest Seahawk. Welcome aboard. Hopefully he never gets on the field. And honestly, this is going to sound a little bit mean, but hopefully he's not even on the team when the season starts because we found somebody better, somebody like a Christian Mahogany, like a Mason McCormick, like a Zach Sinter. All right, so you guys can see where things are coming together here. We need left guards, and we need to pad out some depth at inside linebacker, safety, and maybe a little bit of a final touch on the skill positions. All right, see you guys later. Let me know what you think. If anything, I know it's not a big signing or anything like that, but every little bit matters to somebody.